All right. Hi, everyone. So I'm Benoit Hudson. I'm with Imaginary Spaces, and I want to talk today about how things are going between Unity and Autodesk. So last year, they signed an agreement to get better FBX interop between their applications. And I want to demo the first results of that, well, the first results, where we are now with that. So I'm mostly aiming this talk at game designers, artists, programmers, show you how it affects you. If you're in the film side, then you can think about it as at the beginning of film production in previs, or once you're into more animations, talk about layout and blocking. I'll call it a cinematic, and you should think of it as a sequence. So who is Imaginary Spaces? Unity gave us the honor of entrusting us to develop the FBX exporter for them. So we have offices, our main offices are Montreal, and I work remote from Iqaluit in the Arctic. Our specialty has been to integrate game tech into film pipelines. So we've worked with a number of studios, mostly on secret projects we can't tell you anything about. But one that we can tell you about is Safari. We are hiring a creative director if anyone's interested, by the way. Talk to me after. So Safari is, if I can click play. Safari was a TV series, is a TV series that is just coming out now. And all of these pixels are rendered in a game engine. Unreal instead of Unity, but that's what we were working with. So our collaboration on this project was basically, we went in and helped them understand what could be done in a game engine, what had to still be done in the traditional pipeline given their resources. And one of the big things was they had to switch between applications over and over again. Whereas a normal pipeline is more, you start in some application, and then at some point you break and you go into another application, and everything goes from left to right or top to bottom. So you start in modeling, and that's probably in Max or Maya, rigging, animation, texturing. Eventually you get into the game engine where you build your materials, you do your level design, you build and test. And then at the last stage, you test, and then you say, we really need to up-res that character. Well, you send it right back to modeling. Or you're testing and you're going, we really need a new level, and so you send it back to modeling. And now someone's doing work in Maya, and it's a little slow. You can't build your ideas in Unity and send it back easily. Now, there's a lot of people, if you look on the asset store and search for exporters, there's a lot of people who have hit this problem that they really want to do a full loop between the applications. And I don't know if you can see that, but I'm showing 786 results for exporter, right? No, some of them are bogus, but at least half the ones I checked are actually exporters or have an exporter component. So we really want Unity to be part of this integrated loop between the Autodesk suite of products and back to Unity. That's what this agreement is about. We want artists to be able to use the best tool for the job whenever they're doing it and bounce back and forth totally seamlessly so you can iterate really often. And we all know iteration is how you increase the quality of your games and your film. So that's the vision, right? So where are we now? I'm going to mostly be doing most of the talk in Unity. And I want to start with discussing how to get this FBX exporter that lets you close the loop. And I'll tell you about some other little details that it provides you. Then I want to go through two workflows. So the way we're thinking, mostly we want our tool to be almost invisible. And we want you to think about how you do a certain piece of work and just hop between applications without even thinking about it. You just hit Alt-Tab and it's there. So the two specific workflows we worked on are whiteboxing for level design and cinematics for animation, game capture. You can do a lot of other things, and please come talk to me if you have a specific workflow you're interested in, or go to the forum. We love to get more feedback, figure out other ways people can use this. The first 90% of the talk is going to be about, applicable to if you're a one-person studio or a 10-person studio. If you're in a larger team, then probably you want to be a bit more careful about making sure you only work on your own files and not clobber someone else's. So I'll talk about what you can do with that. I'll end with scripting with the FBX SDK. And actually, I'm lying. I'm going to end with the new features in the just about to be released version. So let's start the demo. So I want to thank Cybernetic Walrus. They gave us, they gave Unity, who allowed us to use some demo material. These are early assets from their game Anti-Graviator that just came out. It looks beautiful, the full complete game. These assets look a little rough on purpose because they're earlier in the production. Right, so first step, how do you get the FBX exporter, right? And the way, yes, I'm in the right place, okay. So right now, if you are using 2018.1, you would go to the asset store, not pictured, and search for exporter, and it's the Unity FBX exporter is on the first page. Coming very soon in 2018.2, you'll be able to go to the package manager, and that's going to be how you get a whole bunch of packages. So you just go package manager, you go all, and you look up the FBX exporter, which is here. And it'll be version 2.0.0. Now, the package manager lets us put out new versions more quickly than every quarter, like Unity comes out. So you don't have to wait for 2018.3 to get a bug fix. We can just put it out. Other things I'm going to be using in this demo, there's Cinemachine, which, as you notice, there's a new version that's just out. And I figured I shouldn't update just before the demo. And ProBuilder as well. So that's how you get it. Oh, one thing I should mention, if you have installed, how many have installed the FBX exporter already? So it's a handful of hands. Okay, so if you've already installed the FBX exporter and you want to install the package manager version, there's an upgrade procedure because the FBX exporter on the asset store is all compiled, and in package manager you get the full source. But that means some GUIDs have changed, and so you get missing scripts. So follow the documentation. There's a procedure to follow. It's fairly simple. There's basically a button to click. Now, once you have the FBX exporters, when you go to the project settings, you will see down here FBX export. And what that provides you here, we have some integrations with Maya and Max. This is a brand new machine, so I didn't get around to installing Max, but the drop-down tells you which applications you have open and allows you to install integrations for all those applications. If you have an application that's in a custom directory, you can just search for it in the Finder. So once you install the Unity integration, which I won't do because it takes a couple minutes, you just tell it where to go. So you can put this directory anywhere on the hard drive, usually outside of your project. And I have put mine in up to documents. I put mine in the integrations directory. So once you tell it where to go, it installs some files there. Usually want it outside of your project because they're not interesting for source control. So ignore that click. Next thing I want to do is, all right, let's think about, we're designing a new level. So Anti-Gravigator is a racing game. Why are we racing? So let's design sort of an early level and throw out some ideas and quickly iterate on some concepts. So I'm putting on my game designer hat here. Yeah, I could also be like the director in Previs hat. So first thing to do, I'm going to say, well, let's look a little at what happens when you play. There it is. So Anti-Gravigator, you just run a ship down a track. It's a racing game, right? And you can go incredibly fast and hit the wall if you're not a good driver like I am. So why are we running down this track super fast? I'm going to try this concept, which is, well, it's because we created some medication in a clinic that's out here that you can't see because I haven't built it yet, because I haven't told my artist it's a good idea yet. And I'm going to run out as a character runs into the ship, hops in the ship, and goes, right? So I don't have a character yet because I don't know if this is a good idea yet, so I don't want to create one. And I don't have a building yet. So I can just drag Ethan, our friend Ethan, from the standard assets. Put a white skin on him, looks like a lab character. And create a ship. And then write a simple script that will, when Ethan hits this trigger, I'll switch the control from being on Ethan to being the ship. That's all I have so far. Now the next thing I want to do is build a hangar for the ship to be in. So I can go to Pro Builder and create a new cube, right? And that pops up this window. So this is going to let me build something very quickly. So I'll just put my cube there. I'll make a 10 meter by 10 meter area, which is going to be my hangar, my conceptual hangar. And I'll make sure that it includes my character and my ship and my Cinemachine camera here. And should be high enough to include everything, right? And not have people's feet sticking out the bottom. Now I've got a building. Next thing to do is let's put a door there. Oh, I have to build the cube first. So there's a talk about ProBuilder tomorrow by Liz McCurry and one other person, I forget, to show you how to use all these features. But it really quickly, you can rough out a little hangar here, and I'll detach the face. That's there. Oh, that was delete. There's detach. So now I have a door object here. I have a cube object hanger here. And now that's my hanger. One issue is from the outside I have walls. When I go inside, I'm seeing the back faces of these faces. So I should go and flip the normals, which on this screen is, there it is, boom, there. So now from the inside, this feels like a building. And the next thing I can do is quickly animate the door. So I can just, well, I have to remember when ProBuilder builds things, it makes them static by default, so make sure, take that off. And then I can easily record a simple animation where my door is going to start where it is. After 2 seconds, It goes down. So there. So that's, so far we have a working design in about 1 minute, right? I should only click once. All right, so now I can run out and through the door. So far, this is all just ProBuilder stuff. But here's where it gets really, really cool. I'm going to do one step here that you won't have to do in the version that comes out publicly. And here's where it gets really cool. When you right-click here, the FBX exporter means you got a few extra options. One of those options is convert to linked prefab instance, which pops up a little window. When I convert to a prefab instance, what I'm going to get is I'm going to build an FBX file, and I'll build a prefab. So I can choose where the FBX file goes, and I usually put that away somewhere where I can find it, but it's not in the way in the project screen. I want the prefab to be more accessible because that's what I'm going to be putting in my scenes. I have some export options on the FBX export. So if you want to use it in Blender, you have to use binary. Most of the other applications can handle either ASCII or binary. So I'll just leave it at that. Binary is also smaller. And there's the other option you often want is the compatible naming option. So Unity lets you put arbitrary strings into a name. So hanger space, that space, looks space, great, exclamation point, right? You can put that in Unity. In Maya, that's going to come out as hanger FBX ASC 032, that, and so on. It's just going to look totally mangled. So if you turn on compatible naming, we convert the names before exporting. A warning comes up if you try that and says your animations might break because your animations are linked to the names. So little warning, but still works. All right, so now I have a prefab. This is just a normal prefab. I can put in overrides, apply them. Because it doesn't refresh up here. So, right, so I can select the prefab in the scene. Right, here it is. It's just a prefab file. But the magical thing is if I go to Maya, after installing that integration, I got this Unity menu here. And I can do an import. And that sends me to my project folder directly. So that basically what we've done is make it much easier for you to find your files very quickly. That's the first step. So it's in the models, hanger.fbx. Right, and if I hit play here, we see the animation. So I've exported. You just saw me, it took me one click, I exported, I got the animations out that I put on this. I got the geometry with the normals flipped, as you can see, because it's black and white on the inside instead of what it would normally be. And it all works. The way it works, it goes into an export set here, so that when I do File, Unity, Export, it knows what to export. And it'll put it directly in the same file that you imported. And you can import multiple things in your Maya scene, and just click on any component of one of the things you imported, go to export, and it'll export that component, all the pieces that you want, in exactly the right way. You can also, if you export by default as the models and animation, if you only want the models, you do export models only. If you only want the animation, you do, someone guess? Export animation only. So I'll show you how to use the export animation only in the later part of the talk. Okay, but for now, I'm going to live right in front of you, model a beautiful hanger, which is to say I'll delete this and import one that I have in my back pocket. Right, so here's a garage. One thing to keep track of, we create a namespace when you import from Unity. So make sure you put your objects in the same namespace so that the names still match up. Now here's my garage. It's got a door that is animated just like before. It's flickering because it's z-fighting in Maya, but that's so that you get double face door in Unity, so you can see it from inside and outside, unlike the Pro Builder demo that I did. And one thing to note is I've got a new item in here called the floor tiles, which is just down here. I've added some extra features, right? So I'm going to select all of these items, add them to the export set, and then if I'm touching any of these, I'll do Unity export. Then I have to wait for Maya to export, which takes a second. But now it's going to clobber my FBX file that I had in Unity. Normally when that happens, you would get in the FBX model would update, but the FBX prefab, you wouldn't get the tiles showing up. You wouldn't get any transforms changing. Now you do. So if I go back to Unity, boom, there it is. This much so far is expected, right? But what's perhaps unexpected is there's my tiles, right? So we keep the hierarchy going. Oh, and I meant to show you that the trigger would show up as well. But not only do we create new objects, if new objects come in, we delete old objects so that your prefab is always in sync. If you made your own changes, then it would have maintained those changes as well as possible. So if the parent got deleted, well, your thing would get deleted. But otherwise, it would try to maintain the same hierarchy that you had before, and just as an override, basically. The key thing where this matters is references. So if you have a reference, if you had a reference to the door in the trigger, which is what I was trying to show you, then it would have maintained that reference, because this is the same door object that we had before, right? Even if we change the hierarchy and all that, it'll match by name. So now, couple things of note. There's an animation in here, but the animation that I'm showing here is it's not the animation in the file. So let me delete this one and put in the animation from the FBX file, which is right here. The symptom, if you forget to do that, is it'll be playing the wrong animation. That's all. There we go. Oh, right. I forgot one step in the setup. So the pivot point in Pro Builder is the middle of the cube. And the pivot point my artist made was at the bottom of the hanger, so they don't quite match up. So we just fix that easily. There. So now I have my scene with the proper asset built in. All the references that I had from the trigger here to the hanger would have been maintained. Any new objects I had in there would have been maintained, and so on. So that's the basic overview of the FBX exporter. So we're able to rough out in Pro Builder or whatever tools you have. You can slap things together from the asset store, put them together, export them to Maya, touch them up in Maya. And if you're doing this for real, you would actually be modeling the thing in Maya, not just importing a file. But spend a couple hours in Maya, ship it back to Unity, and all your links are going to work. All your animations would need a small amount of touch-up, but it's way easier to change the hierarchy than it used to be. I mean, I've been on a game project where someone had a spear, and then they had to change it to nunchucks, which have 2 objects, and then it's like, oh shoot, now I got to delete the character, recreate it, and any link to that character needs to be updated, right? All that pain goes away. So I showed you the whiteboxing workflow. Next, the cinematics workflow. So this one's a bit more complicated, so I'm not going to do it totally live. I'll talk over a video. Right. So what we're doing here is, we set up already an existing video track and timeline. So we'll show you that. So it's a little small, but there's a ship flying along the track, and then goes down the track, bounces down, and then we're thinking, as cinematics director, I'm thinking, I need some oomph at the bottom, something to explain the story. So I'd like to add a character that runs up to the ship at the end. Okay. So I'll show you how to do that. So that same easy import export in Maya that I showed you, we also have it for Max. So you can model rig up your character in Max and export it fairly easily. I talked too fast. Right, so in Max, it's called Export to Unity. We weren't able to create a Unity menu that has import and export. Instead, you go File, Export, Export to Unity. And just like the Maya integration, it knows where your project lives, so it's a lot easier to find your files. And one of the key things, right, export settings, keeping track of your export settings, big pain. So this just sets the export settings exactly right so that Unity will be able to import them seamlessly. And we worked with the team building the importer to make sure that was true. So we're not going to do keyframing on here. What we're going to do is we're going to record gameplay. So this is one of the really cool things that you can do with Unity now is you get the game object recorder, which is available on the asset store. Pull it in, and then build your controller. And we need to be controlling humanoid character here. So when you get out from Maya, you often get animations as generic, but we want them as humanoid for this. All right. I'll speed this up a bit. Right, so we got the game object recorder. We're going to record the dude, right? We created, so we want to record just the transforms and save that into a file here. So that's going to record an anim file, right? Not an FBX file, right off the bat. So now we play the cinematic. Off it goes. Here we are. All right, get ready with controller because the ship's coming around. down it goes. Now we start running at the ship. Okay. So not very skilled controller work. We could take a few more takes. But another thing we can do is just export it directly. So now we have the animation in the timeline, so we can just export it and apply the animation to the rig. Right, so timeline makes it super easy. Now you can play the whole thing in timeline. And now it's no longer controlled. Now we've baked the gameplay into the cinematic. When we export, we can't export humanoid characters. So that's why you saw the video changing it to generic. Right, so now we've got our animation playing. We can right-click on there. Yeah, you have to be out of preview mode. And yeah, so now we can export the clip. This is sort of the same setup as I did for the convert to model thing. The naming, oops, that's strange, the coloring there. But the naming is going to be the name of the character at the name of the clip. And that's a naming convention that allows links to be made automatically. Another thing is when you animate the root motion, and you animate the skin, sometimes you'll see the skin like deviating from the root motion, and that's because there's animation on both, and it combines incorrectly. So if you move the animation from the source, which is the root, down to the top of the bones, that's going to be a lot safer, and that'll get you to make sure that the skin and the bones maintain the same animation. You occasionally see those blooper videos where you have a character running this way and then the fur goes that way. That's the problem that you avoid by doing this. So now we've exported the animation, but we need the reference. So if you select the environment, you can export all those objects, multiple of them. Export the lights, you can export the cameras. Yeah, so lights, cameras, environments, terrains, all of that can go out into FBX. And so then you'll be able to import it into Maya. So you've got, as before, you have the export format. You've got what to include, which we're just going to do models now, not animations for the environment. And then LODs, you can export the highest or the lowest. So we're going to export the lowest because we don't need, it's a sort of a flat area. If you're working very closely to a rock or something, you don't want to export the highest LODs. And then when you select a bunch of objects, you can either say, I want to export these each as an asset. And so then you want to center the world on that asset. So when you import, your rock is at 0, 0, and you work on it locally. When you export a bunch of things, you can export world absolute so that when you're really exporting the whole environment, and when you import all those FBX files at once, they'll show up in the right place in the scene. Oops, I skipped too far ahead. Oops, sorry, I lost my spot. Right. Sorry about this. Right, so we also want to export the ship and various other objects, right? One of the key things you want to export is cameras, and you can work so that you can work on the camera in Maya as well. You get better camera work there. So when you have a Cinemachine camera, right, you have all these controllers on it. So you have to bake that to a real camera. So we need the game object recorder to play and record the camera and bake out the camera track. You can't just export from the timeline a Cinemachine track. Right, so here we're just baking the camera out with the camera, all the various Cinemachine brain clips here. So now we've created an anim file. In order to export it, you just drag the animation onto the camera, and now you can see it in the animator and just export from there, right? Just like I did in the modeling demo. So there's a few different ways you can export the animations, right? Straight from an object that has an animator from Cinemachine. You can export legacy animation components. And then now, finally, we've exported everything. Sorry, I jumped the gun earlier. And we can import into Maya all of the animations, right? So these are all the FBX files that we exported. We just select them all. So we get the camera, we'll get the character, we'll get the character animation, which are separate, the environment, and the lights. And now we have to wait for Maya to import the character, which takes a few, well, import the whole scene, which takes a few seconds. Right, so there we have everything loaded. And you notice all the export sets over here. So we imported a whole bunch of different objects. So now it's created an export set for each of them so that we could re-export them back to Unity, modify them in Maya, and re-export them back to Unity very easily, one by one. All we're going to be working on is the dude animation. In the export set, there's a bunch of settings that you probably shouldn't touch by hand. But those are the settings that are how it knows where to export automatically. So once you've got all this into Maya, you can use all the usual Maya editors. So we've got a baked animation track on the dude, which runs right through the spacecraft, right? Now, probably you'd want to replay a few times, game capture a few times, but maybe you had a really long take, everything worked, and then you messed something up in the last second, right? So you'd want to just touch it up in Maya. Another thing that you probably want to touch up in Maya is foot contact with the ground, which is why it's so important to export the environment. And yeah, if you want to export, another thing that we've seen is you have a walk cycle on your character, and you decide actually you want a slightly better walk cycle. you find a slightly better one, or you do a little bit of mocap for a little part of your cinematic. So you can record everything, delete the frames, and paste in your new frames, right? So my team is mostly programmers, not animators. So we're only going to futz around in this for a second and call it good enough. The main thing to look at is the final export. So now, when I showed you in the modeling part, we were doing import and export the entire object, animation, and models. So here we want to have a naming convention where we can export a clip only. So the naming convention is the model at the name of the clip. And then on the other side, we can keep track of things. So when you do export animation only, it'll export just the bones, basically, plus the keys on those transforms of those bone. Right, so now the animation will have that. So when we switch back to Unity, so when you go to timeline, we have to delete the track and recreate it, unfortunately. That's not updated automatically yet. We're hoping to work on that at some point. There isn't script support for it yet. So then we can recreate it from the track that we found. And you saw it was called walk to ship, not do.walk to ship, because Unity recognizes it. Right, so now we get the new one where the guide is no longer walking through. So this gives you, if you replay this video a few times, you'll see exactly how to get from you record gameplay in Unity, you export using the exporter to Maya, you can export your entire environment and everything so you can get the references, and then you can work on the animation in Maya and export it back to Unity, and that's how you get your new cinematic. Right. So that's that. Now, the last thing I want to touch on in the application is the concept of working in a larger team. So when I was working on this one, I got completely automatic update, right? I just alt-tabbed, and then the prefab updated with the new FBX file. This is a little bit difficult if there's several of you working, say I'm working on level 1 and you're working on level 3, and you update one of the FBX files in level 3, and then I alt-tab into Unity. I should not be updating the prefab for level 3. That's someone else's job. So in order to avoid doing that, we have in the edit menu, project settings, FBX export, we have the auto updater. So when you click that off, you're not going to get the beautiful just alt-tab and it updates right away. You will still be able to update, don't worry. It's just not automatic anymore. Now, when I go to Maya, and let's say another thing working in a big team, often there's naming conventions. So maybe I'm not allowed to call this tiles. Maybe this has to be prop_tiles. Did I get that exactly right? Yes. Right? And maybe this has to be asset_door or something. So you have naming conventions that are going to vary by studio, which the way we expect people to work is, and this isn't like, we're not telling you this is how you should work, this is just how we've noticed people work. The game designer would be sketching in Unity and create something, and just does not care about naming conventions, might not even rename cubes to something descriptive, right? Because you're working fast and you just want to iterate and spit it out. Then the modeler gets this file, and it's got all sorts of bogus names that don't fit the studio's naming convention. So they'll change all the names. When we go and export this, I'll just let it export now. When you go and export this, you can imagine on the other side now, we're going to have all sorts of broken links. Another thing is, remember when I mentioned how the auto updater works, it'll delete nodes that are no longer in the FBX, and it'll create new nodes that are now in the FBX. Well, the auto updater has no idea that tiles was renamed to prop tiles. It can't possibly know because it can't possibly know that the nomenclature is the same. And in particular, now here I just renamed it, but in the previous example, right, that door, I didn't just rename it. I completely created a new one. So to keep, when I Alt-Tab over, everything looks good on the hanger because I didn't rename it, but the door disappeared, right? Because this door is now missing its mesh. That's just the default Unity behavior when you update an FBX file and the names have changed. When I right-click here and update from FBX, that I'll be manually running the updater. And it will, on my screen here, when I manually do this, only when I manually do it, it will ask me, did I really mean to delete the door? And did I really mean to delete the tiles? And the answer is no, I'd rather you just rename this door and you just rename those tiles. And now all the links to door will now point to, well, the same object, but it's called asset door. And now the meshes show up again. The animations play. Well, the animations play? Actually, I haven't tested if the animations will play. Oh, the animation does play. Good, that's cool. I'd forgotten to actually test that. But yeah, so now you have all the links still work out, and that's how you work in a larger studio with renaming requirements and making sure that you're not clobbering someone else's work. I mean, clobbering someone else's work, if you're in a studio that uses Perforce, right, it's just you're gonna keep someone else from working because you've locked their file open. If you're using GitHub, you've probably created merge conflicts. So it's pretty important in the larger studio to turn off the auto updates and manually update. In a small studio, it's really, really handy to be able to Alt-Tab and see the new thing just pop up totally automatically. Like, super cool. You can script this auto-updating mechanism. Come ask on the forum how to do that exactly. I can't really do it live. So that's how you work in a larger team. Scripting with the FBX SDK. Sorry, Right, so what we've got is a bunch of swig bindings. And let me show you, one nice feature of the package manager is you get the packages and you can see in the FBX exporter here. So we're shipping SDK bindings for the FBX. So the FBX SDK is in C++, but now you can access it directly from C#. So you can create an FBX manager, you can create an FBX IO file, you can create an FBX mesh, munge it all together, and build your own exporter. So it's C++, so it's possible to create undefined behavior, also known as Unity just goes poof, which is really annoying to debug. We've tried to make some common cases go away. So if you delete an object and try to use it, we'll just tell you, nope, it's deleted. We'll throw an exception in most cases. but there are still cases where it goes poof. So if you're working with the FBX SDK bindings and Unity crashes, check the editor log to make sure it's not your code first before filing a bug with us. Now, it might also be us, so do log bugs. The other thing, the FBX exporter, we don't have a lot of examples in the C# bindings yet. Working on documentation for that. But you have the full source code now in the FBX exporter. And it is this file. It's a fairly large file. It's not really set up as an example, but feel free to go through here and make your own little changes to the FBX exporter. Right, we had this as hidden code, but now it's all open. You can go through here. We're exporting, get the root node. We go through, find all the animations, find all the object positions and all that. So all of this code will be open now in the package manager version. On the asset store, it's all compiled. You can't see it yet. But once you switch to the package manager in 2018.2, you'll be able to change anything you want here. One request we've already had is to change the export scale. We've had to fix it to a very specific export scale that works in every case we've tested in a predictable way. It might not work the way that you want it, but at least it's predictable. If in your use case is different, then you can change the export scale fairly simply by modifying the source code. And the last thing I want to, just need to get back to the talk here. Right, so new announcements, right? So I've already alluded to the FBX exporter being out, coming soon. As soon as Unity 2018.2 comes out, you'll have access to it, at least as a preview package, and hopefully we can make it full production. The next version that's coming out will have support for constraints. So 2018.2 can import constraints from FBX, and our FBX exporter can also export them right back. So you can do a full loop with Maya with constraints. So your rigs and so on will go back and forth. We have support for physical camera as well. And so that's very useful for everyone in the film community. You can set your film back and other such settings, and it exports between Maya and Unity back and forth. And one really cool thing, the asset store version is editor only. We're now able to put it on the runtime, so you could be recording from a game straight into FBX. So I am sure that's going to be, provide some pretty cool opportunities for anyone building games, VR things, and so on. Yeah, that's a request we've had quite a few times. Okay, so that was a lot of material, and thanks for your attention. We've got, I think, a couple of minutes left for questions. If you want to ask a question, just stand up and go to the nearest microphone. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for the talk. It was great. We really needed this. Do you export sprites?
I don't think we do. We haven't looked at that yet, so I suspect we don't.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let's talk after and maybe see what your use case is and if we can fit it in easily.
I just wanted to ask how much of what you showed.
Can you get closer to?
Sorry. How much of what you showed works with other than Maya, say for example Blender or something like that?
Oh, so how much that we showed works with Blender? If they can import it, then if Blender can import it, then we're exporting an FBX file. Anyone who can consume an FBX file will be happy. And on the import side, that's the import from Unity. What doesn't work is the integrations that point you to exactly the right place and get the export sets and those workflows. Those aren't developed. But those are things you can do by hand. It's just we've automated them. So. Any other questions? Well, thanks for your attention. And if you have any more questions, comments, I'm here for a few minutes yet, and you can find me around the conference. So thank you very much.